Nothing said on the Hivemind is a recommendation to buy or sell securities or tokens. This podcast is strictly for informational purposes only, and any views expressed by anyone on the show are solely our own opinions, not financial advice.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Hivemind podcast. I'm your host, Ceteris. I'm the head of research at Delphi Digital. With us, we have, as usual, Jan, ventures partner at Delphi Ventures, Jason, head of markets at Delphi Research, and LTR, markets on-chain sleuthing at Delphi Research. So we're recording this. It's 10:45 Eastern, Wednesday, February 4th. Markets are just looking disastrous again. We're at 74.2K. ETH is at 2.15K. Sol went under $100. Hyperliquid, not bad, 33.70. So Hyperliquid's had a good past few days there. It's had some good announcements that have come out. Stocks are also selling off a good amount today too. So seems like more of the same. Well, I guess it's like accelerated the past week, especially within like Bitcoin land. So how are we kind of feeling about this right now? I think everybody likes to say, like, I don't know about short, medium term, but long term, I'm bullish, right? But it does. I mean, it does kind of feel like this is a fine, getting back to like fine levels for like Bitcoin, right? If you're looking, I'm not talking altcoins and stuff because I really think that market is completely changed for the good in some respects. But I don't know. What are we thinking about the last few days? Obviously, Galaxy had earnings yesterday too, and was quite disastrous. It was down 20% on the day. There's a lot of quantum talk that came out of that as well. So yeah, how are people kind of feeling about? And actually, one more thing. I think Matt Hogan, was it, or somebody else, said that we're currently in like a 2022 bottom with Bitcoin right now. He thinks we're near the end of it. We'll see. Yeah. So how are people feeling about this right now?
Well, yeah, obviously it sucks. But yeah, no, so like we kind of got the meme, right, where we were gonna go to Sailor's entry price, and clearly we overshot that by a few $1,000s, and seems like we're not stopping right now. I still do. I mean, so like I think like my meme case scenario was like we'll both like hit Sailor's entry price and new Bitcoin highs in the same year. And I still think that could happen. Like I do really think like we will, like the administration will run it hot into midterms. I guess the question then is like, okay, like if that is what happens generally for markets, like how much of that appetite flows through to crypto, or like I guess Bitcoin, and then to crypto more broadly. In that scenario, I do think Bitcoin could catch a bid, and like I don't think it's like like price is obviously like the best driver of narrative, right? Like price leads narrative. So like you get like a week or two of just like good Bitcoin flows, ETF flows come in strong. Like you get decent reclaims of like people's like important psychological levels of some kind, right? Like I don't think you're that far away from like some kind of risk appetite returning to Bitcoin. I am worried about equities. Like I think if equities kind of like puke, like alts are going to zero again, like zero again. I think Bitcoin. I think it'll be really interesting to see like what Bitcoin does. I'm not expecting it to be stronger than equities if equities pull back, but like if it is, it's clearly something to pay attention to. And I think you just have some like big big levels that just like make sense from like long-term time horizons, right? Like 60K isn't that far away. Like I don't want to see Bitcoin go to 60K, but like you have a lot of things at 60K, like 200-week moving averages, like tons of shit that like might entice some longer term buyers to step back into the market. I think like pretty much like anywhere between like yeah, 16 here just like makes a lot of sense for like, yeah, like long-term strategic Bitcoin buys that like you just buy and don't look at for a while. You could go lower, but like, I don't know, like, yeah, like my base case is like, I just don't see this year. I just don't see how with new incoming Fed chair, with midterms, like there isn't some kind of broad risk rally, engineered some way, and Bitcoin would probably be a part of that. So I don't think it's over. Definitely closer to a bottom for me than not. I'm definitely looking to probably buy like spot holdings for the first time in a long time. And yeah, hype, like you said, is like very clearly showing strength in a depressed market. So the thesis is clearly like, if the market stops being so shit, the coin that was doing the best should probably continue to do the best, right? And there's a lot of like actual like reasons why that could be the case. So like, yeah, that's kind of how I'm looking at crypto, and like those are pretty much the only things I hold at this point.
Yeah, I think on initial BTC weakness going back from the previous top was just Sailor kind of going away, and then broader market weakness. And I think the recent leg down was a combo of equities and quantum risk, and we touched on it last week, and I'm sure we'll touch on some more, but that definitely has some impact on price as weakest hands bail, and then the individuals that are next in line in terms of strength act accordingly, knowing that the weakest are going to bail, and so you have a domino effect there. On the equity side, yeah, it's a tricky one. I think recently, especially, but broadly, you've seen a lot of blood in software names, with just the growth of all of these agents and being able to kind of Claude code your way into solutions that take away from the pricing power that a lot of these software companies had, and you're starting to see that show up. I think you saw Jensen speaking, I think it was today, discussing this situation, and his basically counter was that if when you're these agents aren't going to be rebuilding these tools from the ground up, they're going to be using them. So in the same way, a robot won't create a new form of screwdriver, it'll just use an existing screwdriver. Same way these agents will use software via API rather than recreating from the ground up. Naturally he wants to say that, but I think that the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, where yes, the best products will get used, but at the same time, some of these simple tasks and some other things will kind of get rebuilt, and so you'll see loss of pricing power, and I think just the broader uncertainty is forcing a repricing of that entire market. And I think even if you look at equities in 2015 versus the first through most of 2025 compared to past couple of months, you've seen you had the Mag 7 really driving returns in the beginning of that year, and that's since shifted away, and you saw the bottom whatever driving the bulk of the returns, which I think was probably counter to what a lot of people thought or perceived the AI trade to how that would impact markets. So you've just seen efficiency gains at the bottom names, and a lot of these low margin businesses benefiting from those improvements, because there's a lot of kind of margin to get rid of, or like cost to get rid of, to improve margins. And then at the same time, we saw the slowdown in the build out of the data center stuff, and kind of just the exorbitant costs that weren't being matched with revenue, but rather you ended up seeing the effects more downstream in the users of the tools rather than the makers of them. But yeah, so all of that kind of creates scary environment for equities. And yeah, crypto is because kind of we had underperformance when equities were doing all right, and then it's hard to see a world where crypto does well if equities don't. To Jason's point, I guess the counter is that you've seen many times crypto kind of bottom first, but you've generally seen that in an environment when crypto was the fastest horse, right? And so I think if it remains the fastest horse, then you probably see a similar dynamic. But that's been the concern, is whether this reintroduction of liquidity and risk appetite will materialize in a bid in this asset class. And so you've seen metals rip and crypto didn't really do much. At a certain point, I think there's a relative value trade that exists, right? So it's, regardless of whether you think crypto is going to reach massive new highs, I do think there's some relative value trade that will exist after one asset's very overextended to the upside and this one's very overextended to the downside. I think you see some degree of rotation, and then anecdotally, people who I know have cash are kind of waiting for lower levels, right? And I think you typically see that it's just a natural human phenomenon. You can, in your head, you could set bids lower when price is much higher, but as price comes down, people kind of pull those bids and think it's going to keep going lower and lower and try and get to that bottom point. But I think bottoms are much more obvious in hindsight, and so that ends up resulting in a big chase scenario where those with bids start to realize that maybe the bottom's in, and they just can kind of concede and end up buying much higher. So all that to say, I don't really have high conviction in crypto going in either direction right now, but I do think that at a certain point you kind of do see a gap up, because I think people are still ready in position to bid it. I think like on the large asset side, there's been continuous shift to revenue generating assets, and at the same time that takes away from the value of L1. So we'll see, like Solana at 90s looks really good, just based on recent price history. But if enough sentiment has shifted away from their just the general acceptance that an L1 should be massively valuable, then you can see a scenario where things price quite a bit lower. On the ETH side, I know there are a lot of on-chain liquidation levels in the high in the 17 to 1900 price range, I think. So as we get closer, there's always a risk that those start to get hunted. And those are pretty sizable multiple nine-figure positions, if I remember correctly. So those tend to be a magnet as well. So yeah, we'll see. I've started deploying. I've started bidding some more here and kind of happy for it to go either way to some extent. But would rather see a bounce.
Yeah, I think on the stocks, one thing too is like, you've seen software get crushed too. I don't know if you said that or not. But that's just like another sign of kind of like, it's definitely not. It can feel like it's like stocks. The indexes are still making all-time highs, but there's been a lot of pockets that have been getting absolutely crushed, right? And you see like the uranium stuff just going bonkers, and software going to zero. And as you said, some of these like the broad base gains for everybody. Within crypto, on that like Solana versus the Solana looks cheap here. It's like, for me, it's just I don't see how you can hold ETH over SOL at these levels, but that doesn't mean that SOL goes up, to your point, right? Like there is the possibility that the L1 trade is just kind of like over, and ETH is just more overvalued than SOL, but that doesn't mean SOL is going to do well. Like I forget what podcast I was listening to, but they were talking about how like last cycle Avalanche got to like 100 billion, right? And look at something like Monad today, which can't hold 2 bill, and its tech is objectively a lot better. And it's kind of just like, I mean, there's multiple L1s now under $1 billion now, right? Which is that was like unheard of. Like having an L1 was always at least $1 billion for the longest time. So, yeah, I mean, it's
I
that's
think
just
that the revenue meta has impacted that, right? Not directly from the sense of Sol doesn't really make money because it was always going to be based on kind of network effects and holders and usage of the platform, but trade at some silly multiple. I think it's more so that, I think there's been, and you saw Kyle say it today, but generally it's dictated our venture investing as well, where I think it's much harder to invest in Web3 apps that don't have a direct kind of financial component where you're providing, yield or access to assets that can appreciate, or like a second order effect where, you're providing a service, whether it's, sports betting or prediction markets or something like that, where the platform itself generates a lot of money. And so if there's a broader shift to that as the investment, as what's like reasonably investable, then I think the surface area of apps that will get funded and built out kind of comes down. And without, if you're just limited to these financial apps, I think the L1s themselves will gain less and less adoption, because you also have the risk of like the app themselves becoming one if they get big enough. But broadly, I think it just means that there are going to be less viable apps, and that in particular I think hurts, right? If you have something where you have a social network and games and all of the stuff that exists on L1, that can drive a lot of the value. But I think if the market begins to kind of coalesce around the idea that only these financial apps can actually thrive, then the L1 premium kind of needs to re-rate lower.
I think people are just apathetic. Like, there's a lot of apathy. Nobody's interested anymore. Like, previously when we had big dips or whatever, people were still objectively interested in future stuff, or like the future prospect of crypto as a whole, whether that be L1s, L2s, whatever, like, Murad mode, but there was something to believe in per se. Whereas like right now, I think a lot of people are like, okay, yeah, I mean, blockchain text can be used. It's going to be a back end for a lot of finance, but that doesn't necessarily mean that derives any value to our existing L1s, L2s. I mean, I think that's pretty apparent with like Robinhood building its own chain, and then, Stripe and Tempo building their own chain. And you're having all this stuff where it's like people are just going to make their own stable coins, make their own business chains. And sure, blockchains are going to be used as a technology, but they're not going to pay rent to existing companies, quote unquote. And like, we can talk all day about like L1 valuations, but objectively, like, it's pretty hard to value these things, for one, just because they don't act as a normal business. But also, like, on paper, I mean, ETH was what, like 300 bill or something? Anthropic on secondary is like 350 bill. I mean, if you're telling me that ETH is near as valuable as Claude, which is like the number one AI right now and is everywhere, and growing rapidly, I think you're out of your mind. So I think it's more that like more things are overvalued. And yeah, maybe Sol is less overvalued compared to ETH, but I just don't see how you can make a case for those kind of valuations again, especially if we are moving more towards like a TradFi convergence within crypto, which I think we are, where more and more stuff like Hyperliquid per se are being valued more as normal companies, as a result of their business model. So we'll see.
I still think the big upside case does remain for Sol. It's just like you gotta like people are not willing to dream as much and like give the benefit of the doubt of like future plans. They just kind of want to see it happening more. That's probably one of the biggest changes I would say over the last few years. Like, Monad, if it went live 3 years ago, would be trading much, much higher, based on the story that it's telling and like the tech that it's developed, right? Whereas now it's kind of like, okay, this is cool. You built this like performant decentralized EVM chain, but where are your apps, right? What does this really give us over what we already have, right? And that is healthy, that like we're being more critical, right? And that's why you do see pockets of money like, Hyperliquid. You can say that it's overvalued, right? But it is the one protocol that's just doing so much like consistent revenue and volume and continues to like bring on these new markets that even if it might be overvalued, it's like if you want to allocate to crypto, it's easier to make the case that probably still would just rather own hype, right? Than other stuff and trying to pick bottoms on stuff that's just been grinding down forever. So yeah, I still think, I don't know. It's like we always think that things aren't going to change when we get these kind of like long drawn out bear periods. And then something usually ends up changing it. But yeah.
I also think it's like a function of like Hyperliquid is objectively one of the only teams shipping meaningful new improvements. Like HIP3 and Trade XYZ is like it did a ton of silver volume and people were able to trade perps on metals and largely catch moves there 24/7. And now they're integrating prediction markets using
they did over $1 billion in volume on silver.
Yeah. But like no other crypto team, and I'm not trying to like be generalist here, but is like doing stuff that's like, wow, like I really need that. That really fulfills my need right now. Like, wow, you're shipping something that I'm actually going to use like right now or tomorrow. And Hyperliquid's doing that and at a pretty freaking fast rate. Hyperliquid or Unit or, Hyper EVM adjacent ecosystem companies. Whereas like, on Solana, we get another meme coin launchpad. And then on ETH, we get some new, prediction market that's standalone with some new, et cetera, et cetera. And it just kind of feels like stale. And I think that's come to a head. Maybe this forays into like another topic with the L2 thing Vitalik was talking about. But yeah, I think it's just like a lot of apathy around the other stuff. That's like, it's the same old, whereas Hyperliquid is fulfilling needs now. And so there is a case to be made that you can kind of justify a larger valuation because the future EV is better because like you have faith that they'll continue to improve or add more stuff or, do stuff that's like going to be very valuable in the future. Whereas like I can't say the same right now about other things. I mean, ETH wasted however many years pursuing the L2 thesis, 4 years, 5 years, and that hasn't come to stuff. And now the CEO or the creator of ETH is like, yeah, that was all, bullshit. We shouldn't have done that. It's like, well, great. We wasted like 5 years. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you want to go into first, Cedrus. I was curious to kind of get like your take on, because I know I think you've been pretty like balanced with your takes on hype, right? As somebody who didn't really own it initially. I don't know if you still don't or whatever, but how do you feel about Hyper EVM?
Yeah, I feel like they just should like not even do Hyper EVM. Like there's no need, right? Like think about all these EVM chains that are out there today, right? What do they get? They get like an Aave or Morpho fork, right? So money markets. They get some Uniswap fork or a new Uniswap type thing, right? Maybe they get a club, like Monad has a club. Then what else are they really getting on these chains, right? And the thing is, Hyperliquid, you could build the money market right into Hyperliquid Perp Exchange, right? You don't need you don't need like lending markets on Hyper EVM, right? It's kind of like redundant. And there's just like so much more money to be made on just like Hyperliquid's main chain, and they're doing, HIP 3, HIP 4, and whatever future HIPs are. It just seems like that's the way. If there's anything we've learned in crypto, it's like the liquidity. You got to build around the liquidity, right? And like Hyper VM,
but doesn't that isn't like the like kind of part of the point? Like building on Hyper EVM will eventually allow them,
but it will never be the same as just building directly on Hyperliquid, right? Like
I think they know that though. I mean, I think that's why they keep their team tiny. I mean, like compared to their centralized exchange equivalents, like their employee count or whatever is like minuscule. And so like I think they want to keep it that way. For whatever reasons, I know not per se, but like I think they're like, yeah, if we don't have to hire a ton more, bring on more company risk by building it internally, and we can just make sure our core product is good, and then we have people who are maybe better at certain things building it instead of us trying to find someone like Shoku who, has so much experience within equities and all of that. Like, he's probably the best person to build Trade XYZ. And if he's already a top hype holder and already so aligned, I think I do agree with your point to an extent. Like, is there some stuff I think they should have done themselves, like possibly like USDH? Should that have been an internal thing? I agree. Yeah, that probably should have been like their own thing, and they could have owned their own stablecoin yield on top of the Hyperliquid. But with a lot of the other stuff, I think it does almost give them a shipping power that Binance, Bybit don't have, just because it doesn't necessarily fall on Hyperliquid Labs themselves. And so all these people can basically build out the ecosystem and vampire attack the exchanges without it coming necessarily from one company or one thing.
But a lot of these things are done on the hip, like 3, and like you don't need the Hyper EVM, right?
Yeah,
no, not for those things, but like if you want to do like actual, like decentralized lending and like you would, but
you can just build that directly into Hyperliquid. I guess my point is, like, if we've come to the conclusion that blockchains are good for like finance and trading, then the having an EVM chain is like less exciting, because you don't need all that. You don't need this Turing complete like general purpose thing. You basically just want to hold in on the finance, and that's what Hyperliquid is. It's just you just like build everything directly on top of like within Hyperliquid. So it just works like more seamlessly and everything. I mean, we'll see. I agree that like you launch this and you can have other people come in and build on it, but it would still always work better directly on Hyperliquid. Like a money market on Hyper EVM is not going to work as well as just being on Hyperliquid.
Yeah. I mean, like as of now, like I think the criticisms are definitely valid. But I still think it's very early to make a full judgment on it.
Yeah, I mean, there's no downside of
like,
them. Like,
yeah, I was going to say, like, what's like the real downside to it? Like distraction, right? But I think this is the way to approach it if you're going to approach it like this. And like, I don't know, like clearly like Jeff's goal is to have right, like house all of finance, which would include those things that you like don't want to do directly on Hyperliquid that you just might want to do on something like the EVM and just tap into their liquidity or order books or whatever. I don't know. I'm interested. It's the to your point, it's one of the only things I'm actually interested in crypto at the moment right now is watching all these, people go for what's clearly the end goal of like the global exchange, right? Like just housing everything, doing everything, trading all types of assets. And I don't know. I think Tommy and Logan talked about it on the Delphi pod a few days ago or whatever. It's just like it's one of the really big interesting races going on right now in crypto is, and competing with TradFi with Robinhood and places like that. And I don't know if Hyperliquid is overvalued or undervalued relative to TradFi things. I don't know how the regulatory aspect will eventually play into it. At some point, there will have to be a conversation probably around the KYC thing.
So the KYC thing, to interrupt you, is something I've been thinking about recently. It's actually interesting. I think when you implement KYC, it can either be bearish or bullish, right? I think that if Hyperliquid had to implement KYC like a year ago, or even right now, it would probably be bearish, right? But once you basically get all like the retail activity that you kind of want, right? And like all the retail activity that's on Binance and Coinbase and all that, then you want like the big money to start coming on. Then you actually need KYC and everything to get them on, right? And so if you add it too early, you never build up the liquidity with retail, right? But you reach a point where like you kind of stay kind of like this offshore bucket shop in a sense if you never get the real institutional money on, right? And so there will be a point, and I don't know, maybe it's getting closer now. I don't think it's there yet, but like there will get a point with for Hyperliquid, it's probably like, oh, adding KYC and compliance actually now is going to take our product from this level to this next level in like a good way, right?
Yeah. That's definitely the bull case for it. I don't know. It's like I said, it's the one position I continue to hold and actively am buying more in. I do think it re-rates higher when appetite returns. They're just doing too many. They're shipping too many good things, and I think, like I said this last time with Flip, I think like the lighter TG, I think is going to be was pretty telling of I think what will happen to flows when you see all of those other TGEs. The vacuum seems to be flowing one way right now. So I don't know. I missed Binance when Binance like BNB was such an obvious thing back in like 2018 and stuff. Completely missed it and fumbled that so bad. Even though like, the exchange token was just so clear, like this is such a good thing, like such a good business, right? Like, even without like buybacks and stuff, but I don't know, not missing this one. So that's like, yeah, big lesson. Clearly one of the best businesses in the industry. And yeah.
Did we want to talk about the Galaxy quantum thing, or do we want to talk about Vitalik L2 thing? I know LTR, you had some things on the quantum thing, right?
I mean, not much aside from I think it was just like people grasping at any negative news right now to try and explain. I think they did it to CZ as well, like just why crypto has been nuking, why it's been underperforming. And so anytime there's any sort of headline about someone sold X amount or this is happening or CZ said he's calling off the bull run, like super cycle, like
super cycle's canceled.
Yeah, he did. And they're just going to cling to that right now because I think they want some semblance of, oh, that's why, versus like the worst possible scenario, which would be people just aren't believing, and they're just selling because they like don't want Bitcoin anymore, versus maybe quantum or something. Like I think quantum is more digestible to people who still hold Bitcoin as like a reason to sell. And they're like, oh yeah, I can see why you would sell because of quantum, but I believe it's not going to be a big deal. So I still believe in Bitcoin and they'll hold and they feel more confident in it versus like if some OG seller is just like, nah, Bitcoin's over, dude, I just don't believe in it anymore. And I'm going to dump $9 billion. Like, I think that scares them more. Cause maybe there's like some info asymmetry or something that they may know. But
yeah, I think that like if the selling is primarily due to quantum, that would be a good thing. Because while I do think that it is like a real risk that people are taking more seriously, it's like if all this selling really was due to quantum, that would be kind of like a massive overcorrection in the short, medium term due to that, because it's still pretty far away, still unclear if it's even going to happen or not. And there are still things that, I still think that at the end of the day, when it comes to it, the coins will just be like burned or they'll just use for tail inflation or something. I don't know. But I think that the resolution from it will happen. And there are a lot of people working on quantum within Bitcoin. It's not like everybody working on, it's not like there's no team focused on quantum. So I think that if a lot of this selling was really quantum, that would be a good thing. I don't really think it is, like, because like I don't know, the disconnect from 1010 is just so glaringly obvious. That's something systemic really did happen there. And again, you hit that 100K psychological number, it makes sense to sell all this. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, Novo had this interesting comment the other day, and like people aren't really agreeing on his interpretation of it. But there was like some 9 billion seller, and it seemed like part of the reason this person was selling was because of quantum. Galaxy came out after and said that no, that's not what Novo said. I don't know if you read the transcript, it kind of looks like that's what he said, but regardless, it's like it's something that is, if you're like a margin, if you're on the margin, if you're going to sell or not, and then you're like, ooh, quantum seems pretty scary, that can tip you, right? And same on the buying side, that can tip you to kind of hold back a little, right? So we'll see. As I said,
yeah, I was gonna say, it's useful from like a decision making framework. Also, if you know, people are selling for a wide variety of reasons, then you know, you kind of want to assess each of those and think about how many other people will believe that and whether they're right or wrong. But if you have one, then I think it's just easier to kind of quantify whether you think the magnitude of selling is appropriate or not. Granted, it's a very difficult one to quantify.
yeah. It's like chance of 0 in X years is like your math that you got to do. What's the discount rate you use on that, you know?
Yeah, no, the EV is definitely different. Whereas before it was, you know, just money supply reduced by concerns around long-term security, and the thesis was pretty straightforward. Now it's
yeah. I mean, the thing is, for me, quantum can fix the long-term security if they actually just use Satoshi's coins for tail inflation. Like, it could actually be a bullish thing in that sense, right? Because like I don't think the purest angle of you can't change the 21 mil will matter in the long run. Not when you get all the institutions and everyone involved. If like you can do something good with Satoshi's coins where you use it just to like put back into the system to increase inflation for another like 200 plus years, I think the market will take that as like that's a very good fundamental change to Bitcoin, right? So we'll see. I guess the other big thing was like Vitalik came out with this L2 post, basically saying that you know, they need to scale the L1, that the L2 roadmap. You know, these things being like brands of Ethereum are not exactly correct, and that they need to focus more on the L1. I think this was kind of like a long time coming from some people. You saw a lot of victory laps on the timeline yesterday. It's just funny though, because like Sol is like getting hammered today, even more so than ETH. So even if you're right about the like they're wrong on the L2 roadmap, it's like everything is just getting kind of crushed right now. I think this just goes back to though what I was saying with like the hyper EVM stuff too. Like all these EVM chains obviously just like does not make sense. We're kind of just getting the realization to this. I do think it is kind of sad that like we did waste so many years and so much money on so much of this stuff, but it is what it is. Like you can complain about it, but that's also how like free markets and capitalism work, right? You spend money on stuff and it either works out or it doesn't, right?
I think the annoying thing about it is just how generally consensus it was that they don't make sense. Like it's not like an overly intellectual take. That was what most people believed. I think, you know, obviously you're going to have some people that support it, but I'd say if you polled in general, you know, people have been in the space for enough time, investing, researching, majority of them would have been pretty bearish on the economics of the L2 thesis.
Yeah, I don't know. This is why for me, it's like, if I have to pick an L1 token, especially if Ethereum is just going to focus on L1 execution now, it's kind of like, I don't know, man, that they're in such a tough spot with that to come back from that. Yeah, I don't know if there's like much more to say on this. As I said, there was enough like victory lapping and stuff on Twitter the last day or so. I think it's good that it's finally happened.
200 mil of ETH right before posting it.
I think it's also funny that all the L2s are like, no, it's not about us. Like, we're a hyper specialized. We're what he's talking about. And it's just like, no, I don't think, 67 instances of Uniswap forked on your chain just make you like valuable in any sense. So yeah, I mean, I do agree with Vitalik a lot of people thought he just said like L2 shouldn't exist, but it was more like they should be hyper specialized, which again, like I think was everyone's point from the beginning. But I think that's like a good thing about it. Like if you do want, Ethereum to be like the L1 base, it makes more sense to have these like skyscraper tower L2s rather than, like Optimism, Arbitrum, all these L2s were basically just ETH part 2. Like they were, trying to go horizontal rather than vertical. And it just made no sense. But I think everyone agrees with that.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it too is like you literally saw people from Optimism and other roll-ups just saying like, yeah, we're never going to move past stage 1. There's no point.
Is there like I don't know. It's very rare that you see like just like consider all of these things businesses, right? It's very rare that you see like a pioneer in an industry go in the wrong direction for 5 years and then like kind of recover. It's just hard, right? Because you have so many other things that have popped up while that was going in that direction. Sol, right? Like, do you see what would have to happen for you to want to own like ETH or something?
You have to believe that that it's like a hedge against Bitcoin quantum, right? And it's got like the quantum angle and ETH is money and all of that. You can't buy it at this valuation based off tokenization and bringing execution back to the L1 and all this, right? Like it's still like 260 today, 260 billion, right? So just a big number. It's interesting. I was listening to one podcast. This guy does like venture. Apparently, the thing is, I don't know if you want to call ETH a startup anymore, right? But apparently, startups that pivot one time have a higher success rate as startups that don't pivot ever. And then 2 pivots is like kind of similar to 0, and then once you go past like 2 pivots, it like drops off a cliff your success rate. So I don't know, better late than never. They have been scaling the L1 a bit more recently. The thing is, it's just like never, even in Ethereum's wildest scaling dreams for the L1, it's still not even going to get close to even just what like Solana is today. And Solana is going to get so much more over the next few years. And, Hyperliquid will probably get a lot better over the next few years, right? And like Monad basically is what Vitalik is saying here, right? This is kind of the Monad people's point the whole time. Now, that doesn't mean that people are going to go build on Monad now, right? Ethereum could just like fork the Monad design and just use it. They're not going to do it, but like they could theoretically, I guess, right? So I don't know, man. It's just if you a lot of these liquid funds, I think they just like don't even touch like L1 tokens anymore in a lot of respects too. At least like someone like Thea. So
they're just so expensive. It's so hard to like.
Yeah, like I think it's a lot easier to underwrite
specific apps or something.
Yeah, like I think it's easier to underwrite Pump still than ETH, MetaDAO than ETH, Hyperliquid, right? It's just like a lot of stuff has come down so much, like I've been looking into Helium recently and I bought a little as a disclosure. I haven't really bought a lot. I'm just like kind of thinking about it, but it's like some of these things, like Deep In, for instance, is one sector that just got completely destroyed. Like some of these tokens, like Helium is down, I don't know, like 99% or something. But it's actually like making money now and actually has traction, and they're like launching in Mexico and stuff, right? And it's like 200 mil valuation or something, right? And so I don't know if Helium's going to be one of these turnaround things, but I feel like you're getting more of these kind of investments that are much more, that have a fundamental angle, that are much more interesting for liquid funds to start thinking about than to be like, yeah, we're going to try and time the bottom on a $260 billion asset right now. That's just like my perception of stuff. Because it's like you got to price the upside, right?
Yeah,
So
well, yeah,
there's
of
a
course,
lot
right?
of downside risk. What's the upside? Unless you're like a believer, but you need everybody to be a believer, right?
I mean, yeah, that's where I've been at with ETH. But it's always good to double check to see if I've ignored it for too long, and it doesn't seem like I have.
Yeah, it's always good to update and be like, is this pivot like a good? Is this
Yeah.
actually a good time? I've seen some people say like, oh, this is like bullish for ETH, and I try and like hear them out and listen to the opinion, but it's just still hard. It's like I kind of just
At what valuation would ETH be something you would be interested in buying, just like from a valuation perspective?
well, I think it's like what happens to Soul during the same because in my like the way I kind of look at
Yeah.
it is I have like some part of my portfolio I want invested in L1, right? And like if ETH goes down 50% from here, but then Soul also goes down 50% from here, it's like
Yeah,
I think I still would just rather hold the Soul and maybe it'll keep going down to zero, but that's kind of like the one that
the one you'd rather ride
I
to
would
zero.
still rather ride to zero. Yeah.
Something just beeped.
Yeah.
It's a price alert.
So
It's a good one. It's a hype
I
alert.
mean, we'll see. And like, you know, the Tom Lee thing, like there's no steam left there, right? There's a moment there where it hit a new all-time high, right? For like a day or two. And there's a day there where it's like that momentum could have, you know, if you were going to go to 10K, like that was the period where it's just you've just seen it try and break out and get crushed so many times.
I also feel like ETH just does this every few years. Like we had that alliance with ETH that I think Paradigm was a part of. And like it seems like every year or two there's some like, let's make ETH great again. And then they get together and they post a bunch of bullish stuff and they have a new direction for the foundation and they're pursuing this or pursuing that. And then it just feels like the US government as far as like bureaucracy and bloat. And then it's just like nothing happens. And then they do it all over again. And so like I just don't know how you have any faith that even if Vitalik says this in his blog post that anything is going to change. Like these L2s aren't something to shut down their business because Papa said so. You know, they're still going to launch tokens. They're still going to inflate salaries. And like, yeah, it's like at this point for ETH to have any sort of provenance or any sort of trust within the ecosystem again, they just need to like actually do stuff, which sounds crazy, obviously, because they just don't. But I think almost their decentralization blinds them a bit in that regard, where they feel like they need to be arm's length away. But like when it comes to this, you at some point you got to step in and be like, yeah, we really need to change something.
I just think that like, and I've felt this way for a couple of years now that, and this is why I've tried to like not critique Ethereum as much over the past year or so, is because I genuinely do not think that you can actually fix it. And when I say fix it, I mean fix the market cap to the product. Like I just don't know what they can do that you start thinking about like $1 trillion targets again at this point. Because they can't just become like a Solana type. Like people really underestimate how much like work goes into making Solana and like the mindset and it's like a complete culture shift. It's not even like Ethereum people are talking about getting 6-second block times in like 5 years, right? Solana's like we need to get to 25 milliseconds or like we can't compete.
Well, it just feels like the difference between like an actual business versus like a research experiment, which is like what ETH has felt like to me. Like it's like this nonprofit, you know, New Mexico lab that's just like one big research paper. It's like Vitalik is some professor that just like wanted to experiment, and so we did all this.
Yeah. I don't know. The ETH guys always talk about how like Bitcoin holds the industry back and there's so much market cap in Bitcoin that like we would go higher if it wasn't for Bitcoin. Maybe it's ETH, man. Like maybe like a lot of market cap in ETH needs to get distributed into a lot of other stuff within the industry. I don't know. We'll see. Like the thing is, you're seeing the validation that a lot of this tech is going to be used for finance, right? And it will have completely overhauled the financial system in like 10 years from now, right? So there will be tons of opportunities over the next 10 years, which makes me remain bullish and optimistic.
I mean, yeah.
You just
Yeah,
got to be
exactly.
like more critical about the valuations of stuff you're buying, basically.
Well, also, like I had that write up in the Delphi Alpha feed yesterday. It's like even if this is going to be
That's all it
the
does,
most
right?
financial changing FinOps technology since like internet computing, this could like our existing L1s and L2s and like crypto projects could be the AOLs. And like there's a valid chance that like 5 years from now, even crypto could be ingrained in every single business, and it could be some totally different chain that like doesn't exist yet. Or so like, yes, I agree with you. I think there's like gonna be tons of opportunities, but I don't think that necessarily means by default that, you know, it's gonna go to existing tokens or existing projects. Or
Yeah, I
existing,
just hope it stays in like the public markets.
yeah, totally agree.
Because that's like, if they're new chains and stuff, as long as they're public and all the gains aren't just privatized, because that has been like the main beauty of like crypto's entire history, is that all the gains, for the most part, early days, not like later with all these high FTV bullshit launches and stuff, but like for the majority of its history, the gains were all public, and that was like great, right? So if it's like, oh yeah, Tempo just becomes this like massive chain, and then the token launches at like, you know, 20 bill or something, and all this, that would suck. Or like things don't even launch tokens, right? Like you have some, I don't know, Canton's a good example of this. Like Canton is this TradFi insider club, right? That you have these super validators, which are all these trusted old guard TradFi institutions, right? Like, I don't know, like what if Canton in 5 years is like is one of the most used chains, right? A lot of those gains just went to like the old guard.
Yeah, I mean, if it's one of the most used chains, I think there have to be a bunch of things it's used for, and those would likely be investable.
Yeah, hopefully.
And you see the growth of, you know, Legion-like platforms that have opened up the investment universe to non-institutions at an earlier stage.
Yeah, I just hope we still keep all, like, the thing that public blockchains are really great for is all like the weird kind of like risky stuff, right? Like pumped up funds never being created on Canton, DeFi Summer's never happening on Canton, and so I hope we're still able to create these like crypto native new things. Like I hope that we haven't exhausted all of those, and I think a lot of the apathy right now is because people think that we have exhausted a lot of that. Because if it's just building products that we already know of, then you can build those on like these private chains and everything. But all like the new risky stuff is still going to need the Ethereums and the Solanas of the world to kind of like test them out. So
I mean, if you're building a product that is standalone useful, then you would likely opt for the non-private chain, unless you have some serious geo or KYC restrictions that you want to implement.
yeah. All right. I think this kind of exhausts all the topics
Yeah.
we talk
started
about.
at 74.2. We're down $1,000. We're
That's
nailing
not
it.
bad considering what it's usually like. Usually we're down like a few $1,000 now.
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
we're,
price
you
has
know,
gone down
we're
a
like
lot.
$30,000.
We're running out of
lower,
thousands.
The
you know?
magnets, yeah, we're $1,000 moves are actually starting to be a lot, man.
So
At least stocks are down today. So
that's what I told Jan. I was like, like at least stocks are also down.
yeah.
We got to get Duncan back on here one time though to revisit the Galaxy thesis and defend his honor from all the trolls in the comments. Now that Galaxy's been walloped.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
mean,
think it's changed much.
No, I don't think so. I just wanted to
Yeah.
revisit now that Hype is doing better than Galaxy. It was a rough couple months.
yeah, we'll see. Maybe Galaxy just needs to sell the crypto business.
Yeah, they're just going to become an AI data center business. That's,
Yeah,
Probably should.
and they'll do better,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Do a spin out.
All
All right, guys. Well, this is good. I don't know. 2 weeks from now, let's
Surely
goodbyes. We'll be
prices
back.
will
We'll
be
be
down.
back. We'll be back over 80 2 weeks from now. You know, it's the way. I'm gonna start nibbling. Hopefully, works out for me.
The dip keeps dipping.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. Good episode, guys. See everybody in a couple weeks.